Yes, please.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
The chance to shape your future is here. Learn and connect with exciting new opportunities. Are you ready for the next step?
Good morning, everybody. My name is John Wood. I'm the manager for Wales at Innovate UK and the cluster lead at the Cardiff Capital Region City Deal. And on behalf of the co-founders of Emerging Tech Fest, Innovate UK, Technology Connected, KTN and CMET, I'd like to welcome everybody to this morning's plenary session, which opens day 2 of the Emerging Tech Fest. I'd like to thank our partners, the University of Wales Trinity St David's MADE project, the Welsh Government International Trade Team, and the Centre for Photonics Expertise, and Thales UK. This is the opening plenary of day 2, a session called How Can Tech Drive Equality, Diversity and Inclusivity in the Workplace? And I really don't think there's a more important topic that we could be discussing. We have 2 incredible speakers to discuss this topic, and then some questions and answers that we can put to them. If I can ask everybody to put questions into the chat section, and I will field those to our speakers at the appropriate time. And also you can use that chat function to introduce yourselves, to introduce your businesses, maybe put a link to your business in there. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our first speaker, LaShawn Lindsay. LaShawn is the Director for Infrastructure Operations at Amazon Web Services, but is no stranger to Wales. She is the Welsh Government envoy, or one of the Welsh Government envoys to the United States, and was Managing Director for GE Aviation in Wales for several years. LaShawn has always been an advocate for equality and diversity and has received several global accolades for her efforts. So there really is no better person to begin this plenary session. So LaShawn, over to you, please.
Excellent. Thanks so much, John, for the introduction. First and foremost, everyone, it's a pleasure and definitely a privilege to be here today speaking at the Emerging Tech Festival. What an amazing agenda and an impressive group of attendees. As John said, I'm LaShawn Lindsay, pronounced LaShawn, and I'm currently the Director of Infrastructure Operations at Amazon Web Services. I'm responsible for the operation of the data centers in the Washington, D.C. area. I joined Amazon 7 months ago after spending 23 years in various functions and roles at General Electric. I've been back in the USA for 3 years now after having spent 3 years in Wales. So unfortunately, I've now lost my Welsh accent. Thus, please excuse my strong American English accent as I speak to you today about the importance of equality, diversity, and inclusion, ED&I, in the workplace, how technology can play a role in improving ED&I, and some challenges businesses may face as they embark upon improving ED&I. First, I'll define equality, diversity, and inclusion, ED&I. Equality simply means having an equal playing ground where all employees have the same opportunities and support to be successful. I simply define equality as nothing more, nothing less. Equality doesn't mean that we're taking something from one group of people and are giving it to another group. It simply means nothing more, nothing less for your diverse employees. So for diversity, diversity has taken on different meanings over the years. But when people are talking about diversity in the workplace, it usually means having varying race, gender, and ethnicity across your employee base. However, having varying age, sexual orientation, religion, education, abilities, and life experiences are generally harder to measure, but are also important elements of diversity. For inclusion, it means having a work environment where everyone is treated respectfully, are valued, and are appreciated, and have equal resources and opportunities. There's that word equal that I mentioned earlier when I spoke of equality. So since inclusion incorporates equality, a lot of companies are changing the E in ED&I to equity. So let me define that as well. Equity means there's a guarantee of fair treatment, access, opportunity, and advancement. It means a company has a state where individuals and not groups have the specific support needed to succeed. For example, equity means, what does LaShawn, a Black gay female, need to be successful? Noting that not all Black gay females are the same because we've all had different life experiences, education, etc. So we really have a tendency to talk about things without defining what we mean. So hopefully taking that pause to define equality, diversity, inclusion, and equity was helpful for y'all. Now I'll jump right into my content. So many studies have been done and definitively show that diversity and inclusion in the workplace allow employees to feel more valued, motivated, and appreciated. When employees feel that they can bring their whole selves, which means every element of who they are, to work, they are happier and thus stay longer, are retained, and are more productive. Also, companies with diverse and inclusive workplaces are more likely to attract and hire other diverse employees. So that's why it's so important to ensure that you continue to make progress on ED&I. You know, for me personally, when I talk about diversity, I tell companies, and especially those in the tech space, that it's important to have an employee population that reflects your customer base. Otherwise, how can you know what diverse customers truly need if no one on your team can speak to what diverse customers may need? How can you successfully innovate, stay agile, and ultimately stay relevant if your company can't assess or address the needs of diverse customers, especially when we're all living in this new, agile digital world? ED&I just makes sense, and studies prove that it needs to be on the forefront of business strategy, focus, and action, but yet there are still problems and gaps across the world with ED&I in business. In the current external environment centered on racism, anti-Semitism, xenophobia, and misogyny that you're all seeing play out across the globe, and especially here in the USA, including the murder of George Floyd and the domestic terrorist attack on our Capitol building by white supremacists, has shined an even brighter spotlight and just shows that we still have an ED&I problem. Even with the amazing technology that has allowed working from home, working virtually, this coronavirus pandemic has further exposed and solidified the disparities and inequalities that disproportionately impact our diverse populations. Our brown-skinned populations have the highest death rates for COVID-19 because of systemic healthcare disparities and the socioeconomic issues that have led to their disproportionately being labeled essential employees in the workplace, because these diverse employees are disproportionately the ones doing the hands-on manual jobs, the grunt work. To see whether a company is truly embracing ED&I, just look at its leadership team. If you see that the diverse employees are at the bottom of the pyramid, i.e., are the ones doing the grunt work, but aren't represented in the leadership roles, your company is not strong on diversity. Your company has a glaring ED&I problem, and the image of having diverse employees doing the heavy lifting, grunt work roles, but not being represented in leadership roles says a lot about your leaders and your company's culture. And due to existing gender inequalities, our female population has lost more jobs than men during this pandemic. Women make up 39% of the global employment, but account for 54% of the overall job losses. I'll repeat that again. Women make up for 39% of the global employment, but account for 54% of the overall job losses during this pandemic. This virus has shined a spotlight on the burden of childcare that women still carry. Essential women have been disproportionately faced with losing their jobs or staying home with their children who are not in school and or caring for aging parents. So as the spotlight was being shined even brighter in 2020, it just became more obvious that the ED&I gap is still prevalent and that companies must stop talking about equality, diversity, inclusion, and equity and start making meaningful steps to measure, improve, and sustain, noting that technology will be key in this transformation. Companies must have technologies in place that create a single source of truth measurement system for ED&I performance. These systems must be able to clearly show how a company is doing on diversity and whether the company is truly improving on all levels of the organization. So just ask yourself, do you know how your company is performing across those diversity groups that I talked about before? Does your company publish its diversity metrics? Does your company have the right granularity in its diversity metrics? Can you see the intersectionality metrics? Can you see those diversity metrics across the different levels of the organization, the different levels of the pyramid? The answer to those questions are generally no. But again, technology and analytics can help because the first step in any improvement effort is to get the data and metrics. And getting the correct, accurate data continues to be a challenge for a lot of companies, which brings me to the first challenge that companies face as they embark upon improving ED&I, admitting there's a problem because the data metrics aren't being captured, aren't being shared, or aren't granular enough to see that there is an ED&I problem. It's hard to argue with data, so get the ED&I data. Use technology to get that data. Second, lack of strategy. Communication plans, training, and driving a shared need also create challenges. Having a strategic action plan that clearly assesses current state of ED&I and in turn shows the roadmap to the desired future state of ED&I is key. That strategic action plan must also incorporate those metrics and data that I talked about before and include communication and training plans. It is critical that people understand why and how in any ED&I improvement efforts. When I was the managing director of GE Aviation Wells for those 3 years, which was the largest industrial company in Wales, some employees came to me to support the formation of a GE gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and ally chapter. We spent 3 months just forming and then executing on a strategic action plan, which included training and listening sessions. It was so important to just educate everyone on what we were attempting to do, what it meant for them, and to just remove the threat. You know, again, a lot of people feel like as we're embarking on these ED&I efforts, we're trying to take something from them to give to someone else. And so for me, I just kept saying, listen, it's all about equality, nothing more, nothing less. And we just spent a lot of time listening and training. And then once we launched our chapter, the GE Aviation Wales chapter became GE's largest gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and ally chapter in the UK, and all of the UK. And we were centered right there in the heart of the Welsh Valleys. But we were able to accomplish that just by doing the work up front and building those strategic action plans, which included listening to our employees and getting in front of any threats that they perceive. And finally, I'll end with emphasizing the power of allies. The voices and engagement of allies are key in driving ED&I progress. Historically, it's the oppressed people that have started the movements for equality and civil rights. But having the allies join those movements created the momentum and actually moved those efforts forward. So if you're an ally, please don't sit in silence. You must speak up and push hard for ED&I progress within your company. If you see something, say something. Please get comfortable being uncomfortable. Thank you again, everyone, for your time today. I'll now turn it back over to John.
Super, thank you, LaShawn. I guess one of the downsides of virtual festivals is you can't see the standing ovation that I'm sure you would be receiving across the UK right now. Fascinating talk. I think lots of takeaways and lots of questions to ask. Perhaps we'll come to questions at the end of the session, and when we can ask you and Emily some questions together.
Super.
So
Thank you,
Sean. And I'd now like to introduce our second speaker for the session, Emily Knott, who is my colleague at Innovate UK. Emily is the Head of Diversity, Equality and Inclusion at Innovate UK. And Emily has played a vital and pivotal role in spearheading equality, diversity and inclusion activities of Innovate UK. Most notably and outwardly, she's put in massive efforts to raise the profile of female innovators and increase the number of applications from women into Innovate UK. And then there's Emily's pioneering work with the Prince's Trust to find young people from across the UK with great business ideas. But I will let Emily tell you all about those. So Emily, over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that introduction, John. I'm just going to share my screen. I've got some slides I'd like to use. So let me put those up. And firstly, I just want to say thank you to LaShawn for that fantastic kind of intro and overview of, why this whole agenda is so important. Particularly loved, going through the definitions and that difference between equality and equity, which, is kind of like an ongoing conversation about the way that we should be presenting the work that we do. And I think really hitting home, why this agenda is so important right now. It's never been more important for businesses to be really focusing on this agenda. So what I'd like to do now is talk to you about the work that I'm leading on at Innovate UK, the UK's innovation agency, and in terms of promoting equality, diversity and inclusion in business innovation. So I'd like to start by talking about the outcomes that we're looking to deliver against, not just Innovate UK, but across the innovation system, the innovation landscape, the support for innovation in the UK. And then I just want to run through some examples, not everything we're doing, but just a few examples that hopefully will be interesting and relevant to the audience here today about, practically what we're doing, the steps we're taking to kind of help us to deliver on these outcomes. So starting with the outcomes, what we want to see is a more diverse innovation system where difference is valued as part of that system, where anybody with a great idea, no matter what their background is, has an equal opportunity to succeed. And really importantly, we need to start thinking about that future pipeline of talent for innovation and getting more diversity in that. So we want an innovation system, we want innovation to be attractive and look exciting to future generations. We want to see more businesses taking this agenda seriously. So, listening to what LaShawn was saying about this, it is really important. We want more businesses to see that. We want more businesses to be building EDI into their strategies, into their growth plans, because we know that is going to ultimately make them be more competitive, more profitable, and increase their ability to attract and retain the best staff. With the Innovation Agency of the UK, so we want to be supporting innovations where EDI has been factored in right at the very earliest stages of those ideas for innovations being thought about and those innovations being developed. Because we know that if we do that and if we push forward with that, those innovations will be more successful, they will make more money, but also they will be delivering benefits to as wide a possible part of society. And then really nice, again, linking up with what LaShawn said about data and evidence. It's really important that we have and we start collecting the data, because at the moment there are huge gaps in our understanding. And we need the right data, we need evidence to enable us to target our efforts, our actions in the right places where it's going to have make the impact and the difference we want to see. But also we need to be able to monitor and track that we're being successful in what we do. So, what are we doing? Here are some of the examples of things and steps that we're taking. So communication, really important. For us, we need to reach new audiences. We need to kind of move away from kind of the networks that are already in our space, already talking to us, already engaging with our support, and find new people, new businesses to work with. We know that the way that we communicate, what we say, makes a huge difference to who wants to listen and who wants to engage. So we are using a lot of targeted communications with specific communities that we want to engage with better. And just some examples here with the Women in Innovation and Young Innovators campaigns that I work with. So with those campaigns, since we've started that very targeted work, we've reached over 7,500 women and over 2,500 young people actually just since March this year have started engaging with us, new to Innovate UK. We do lots of online activity, lots on social media. We're running lots of events all the time, all about providing inspiration, hearing from others going through similar things, facing similar challenges, providing practical advice and tools, and really highlighting and signposting different opportunities for the innovators we're engaging with to get the support they need. But this isn't about us working alone. So really important here is about kind of engaging with other partners that are already much more kind of used to working with the groups that we want to engage with and already have some of those connections. So that's regional organisations, but also, you know, more of the grassroots organisations that we need to partner up with and join forces with. Talking about that talent pipeline and getting more diversity in the talent pipeline for the future, you know, the next generation, young people are really important. How can we get them excited about innovation? We think it's really important that we encourage the innovative companies that we're working with to get out there and engage with schools. We know it's not easy, but there's lots of support out there to make it easier for companies. One of the things that we're doing with our Women in Innovation programme is we're rolling out purple plaques at schools across the UK, where the Women in Innovation award winners we're working with have a connection with that school. Maybe they went to the school, or their children go to that school, or the school is located near to their business. So these plaques are about celebrating the women innovators, but they're also about leaving a lasting legacy at the school on innovation, and hopefully a talking point, you know, from now on, that students, but anybody also visiting the school will want to know, you know, what's that plaque about, and then start that conversation about innovation. So we want to see more of that happening. We'll be rolling out more of those purple plaques, and you'll see actually Jessica Bruce at the bottom here, in the middle at the bottom, where there are two plaques. Jessica is from a company called Run 3D, and she went to school in Abereren. So these two purple plaques are at the comprehensive school in Abereren. There's a plaque in English and a plaque in Welsh that we unveiled there. And we work in partnership with Founders for Schools, which is a fantastic platform doing exactly what I said about trying to make it easier for businesses to engage with schools. Research and evidence for us, you know, so how can we use evidence to inform what we do, make sure that what we're doing is evidence-based. We're one council in UKRI, so we sit with 8 other councils that are research focused. So research-based policy making, evidence-based policy making is really, really important, but also we've got access to the very best researchers in the UK to help us with this. So an example of some of the research that I have commissioned is this report here that was published over summer. And I asked the Innovation Caucus to lead on this research for me. So the Innovation Caucus is a network of social scientists, and they're social scientists working across the UK. And they're funded by Innovate UK and also the Economic and Social Sciences Research Council. What they did was a literature review, you know, an extensive survey, and some focus group working with disabled people and people from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds to see how can we better increase participation in business innovation. What are the challenges and opportunities? So, I mean, headline, you know, there are great opportunities. We can be doing much more to increase participation. Thinking about what the barriers are at the moment, you know, examples of, you know, homogeneous business networks that don't represent society, feelings of not fitting in, actual and perceived discrimination being talked about as well. So, you know, really significant factors that we need to address, and some clear recommendations for us. So we'll be taking forward new actions off the back of this research shortly. And, you know, one thing that's important for me is that we kind of acknowledge that, you know, we could be part of the problem ourselves. You know, we could be perpetuating some of the inequalities in the system by the way that we work and the way that we make decisions. And this bit about, you know, we need the evidence and we need the data to kind of review that and explore that. So we need to look at our decision making, our processes, the distribution of our funding, and work out, you know, what could we do to make changes so that we're incentivizing and rewarding diversity and inclusion for the future. Some of the things that we're doing, we now ask all applicants for Innovate UK competitions to complete an EDI survey. That's a requirement. And we have made some changes to the application forms or our support for our competitions. So that is really important, because when at the application stage, that is where we can exert a significant amount of influence. That's when, you know, if we change the way that we kind of ask questions and what we expect, that will kind of have an impact. So what we're saying here is to businesses, this is a really important agenda for us. And this is important for us in terms of working out what a good quality application is. So EDI is now absolutely part and parcel of that application process and what good innovation looks like. And then lastly, I just wanted to talk about one example of the targeted programs that I've been leading on. So Young Innovators, John mentioned it earlier, and the Associated Ideas Mean Business campaign. So this is a program that was launched in 2018. It's a partnership with the Prince's Trust. And it's all about finding young people from right across the UK who've got fantastic ideas for innovation and providing them with support they need to make that idea into a reality. What we want to do with the programme is demonstrate that there are lots and lots of different routes into innovation. And we want to empower young people from all backgrounds to kind of engage in innovation and ultimately get more diversity in innovation for the future. So we had a competition last year. It was the second competition we've run for awards under the programme. And we had a huge response from the community. We had over 700 applications, which actually was more than we were expecting. COVID has obviously played a role here, and in light of that, we've decided to kind of increase the budget for the programme. We've doubled the budget, we've doubled the number of young people we're going to be working with through the competition. We're working with 64 young people because of, you know, we think it's more important now more than ever, this programme, and because also of the fantastic response we've had. The environment we live in is changing. You know, the way we live our lives is changing, and what's important to us, I think, is changing too. And young people are the future of innovation. They are the future business leaders, and we need to kind of tap into that talent and nurture that talent. And that's exactly what this programme is all about. And it's really encouraging to see that the young people that we're working with, the businesses that they've started, they're really driven by wanting to make the world a better place, by wanting to help people in their lives and to make the environment, you know, a safer and to protect the environment too. So let me just talk about two examples of young innovators from Wales, actually, that we're working with through the current competition. We've got Shannon, who set up a company called Jenny's Floral Design. And Shannon came up with this idea when, unfortunately, her grandmother died, and she decided that she was going to take control of getting the flowers ready for the funeral. And she, I guess, was exposed and saw kind of how flower arranging, how forestry works in the UK. And this quote here, you know, the traditional supply of flowers in the UK has detrimental effects on the planet at most stages of the chain: air pollution, pesticides, floral foam wastage, and single-use plastic, to name a few. So her business is all about kind of addressing that and bringing more sustainability into floral design. And then we've got Alex Nunes, and he set up a company called Plantsea. So Alex grew up in rural Wales, and I guess he saw firsthand how much single-use plastic is used in farming and agriculture. And not just that, but the plastic kind of hangs around. It just doesn't disappear. It stays there, and it just doesn't go away. So his business is all about finding solutions to that single-use plastic that will disappear and won't stay and hang around. So he's working with solutions derived from seaweed. So that's just two, you know, hopefully really great examples you can see of the young innovators that we're working with in Wales. All of the young people we're working with are at fairly early stages with their businesses. They'd welcome, you know, help and support from other organisations and companies that they could partner up with. So, you know, if you think you've got anything you could help Alex or Shannon with, then, you know, please let us know and we'll connect you up. And there's a brochure actually that lists details of all of our award winners on the KTN website, so check that out too. that's all really I wanted to say. I hope that's been a useful highlight and walk through just some of the activities, as I say, that we're working on at Innovate UK. And I hope from this session, you know, some of the businesses taking part will start thinking a little bit differently about EDI going forward. And I'd urge you, you know, take action now, be bold, and you will reap the benefits. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Emily. That was brilliant. So if I can ask LaShawn to rejoin us as well. I guess for me, you know, lots of takeaways from the session. I guess for Emily, it's kind of, you know, if an innovator looks like me, then that could be me. And you know, that's the message we need to be getting across. And then I guess from LaShawn, I mean, if you look like me, then we need to be allies, you know, and you know, there are plenty of people who look like me, and it's really important that we are really strong allies, and you know, ensure that equality, diversity, inclusivity are part of the fabric of the business, because of the productivity gains, because of the importance, not because it's a tick box agenda that we, you know, needs to be done. Plenty of questions coming through. So I'd like to put the first question to LaShawn. How do we get EDI data that's accurate? Some people do not want to share their EDI data, particularly in companies where EDI has not been on the agenda. They often don't feel safe in giving this data.
Right. I mean, that's a great question. You know, as I look at it, you know, I always talk about the fact that when I break it into high level, two categories of diversity, right? It's the visible traits, for example, your gender, your race, your ethnicity. You can generally see that, right? Gender identification. And then I talk about some of the ones that we have to disclose, like sexuality, right? Whether you're a veteran, in a lot of cases, whether you have a disability. And I always tell companies, I'm like, look, if your employees that have the non-visible, the ones that they have to disclose, diversity traits, if they see that you're oppressing your folks that have visible ones, they'll never tell you, right? If your employees see that you're unfairly treating your females, your diverse minorities, your brown people, odds are they're never going to have the courage to come out because of fear, because they know that your company does not have an environment in which they can do so. So I always say that, look, this ED&I improvement, you always have to break it into phases, right? You can't just go in and just say, hey, we're going to improve EDI. That's why I talked about strategic action plans. You've got to start somewhere, look at current state and say, hey, this is where we are and this is where we want to be. And you've got to communicate that to the employees, because your numbers may be bad, your metrics may be bad, your culture may be bad, your environment may be bad. But by communicating your plan to the employees and saying, hey, look, we acknowledge we have a problem. These are the phases we're going through to help. Then you're going to start getting more of that self-reporting, right? But absent of that, you're never going to know how many LGBT folks you have. You're never going to know how many veterans you have. You're never going to know how many people with disabilities, invisible disabilities you have, mental illness and things like that. So that's how I say that you get the accurate information, by making sure that you start creating that culture of inclusivity where people can be who they are and are comfortable coming to work, bringing all of them and not just part of them because they're afraid to be honest, because your culture doesn't allow them to be who they are.
So for any senior leaders, you know, watching, would you have maybe, you know, one first step, one key takeaway that they can today, or, you know, implement into their business?
Yes. I mean, I think it does start with leadership. And I think the first step in any situation is admitting you have a problem, right? That's step one. And I saw a question up there before earlier about unconscious bias training and the effect that it has and if it's effective. And I think that we get caught up so much, John, and all of this language and these cool terms. And for me, I like to keep things simple, right? So as a leader, the first step that you need to take, you know, in the George Floyd movement, this knee on the neck, right? Where the cop had the knee on the neck. Knee on the neck became symbolic of oppression, right? And so bias and oppression. And so I grew up in South Carolina, United States, and I had a knee on my neck pretty much my whole life because I'm African American female in South Carolina, gay. So you can imagine the volume of knees that I had on my neck. But the difference for me is that my mother taught us how to breathe while those knees were on our neck. But as a leader, I always tell people, and even if you're diverse, my first step is saying, look, there's a problem. You as a leader need to look in the mirror and ask yourself, whose neck do you have your knee on? Because everybody has a knee on somebody's neck, whether they realize it or not. So we can call it unconscious bias and confuse people, or we can just say, whose neck do you have your knee on? And so as a leader, that's the first step. Whose neck do you have your knee on? Take steps to remove it. And oh, by the way, become an ally and help remove the knees from everybody else's necks. So that's the way that I would start it, honestly, John. And that's the way I speak about it with my leadership team. Keep it simple so that they understand.
Super. And I mean, I love your simple message about nothing more, nothing less. You know,
Yes.
I'm a simple guy as well. So let's keep this. I mean, let's turn on to that unconscious bias question, and Emily, maybe if I put that one to you because it's particularly relevant, I guess, where you're assessing applications, and we have a pool of expert assessors, so the question from Tim in the audience was, a recent report by the BBC suggests that unconscious bias training just doesn't work. But he disagrees. So, and I would disagree as well. So, what needs to be included in that training? And also, maybe you could talk about any steps that you're undertaking around unconscious bias training in assessment of applications.
Yeah, so I think that the training has been under quite a lot of criticism, and there has been research showing kind of it's not as effective, or it could be having adverse consequences. But I think it's not that the training doesn't work, it's how the training is used. And it's not that you have the training and then you tick the box and then that's it. That's the start of a process, and that you do the training and then you work differently and you have a plan to kind of move that forward and take that learning. And I think that's the bit that's kind of lacking probably in terms of how the training is being used. And also the terminology, and maybe as keep it simple, as we've just been talking about, is a better way of thinking about it too. I think for us, in terms of obviously decision making, and you talk about in the assessment, I think we need more evidence and data on that to see what's happening. And I think we need to acknowledge that there may well be bias in the decision making, but at the moment we don't really know. What we need to do is start piloting different approaches, and that's what I'm quite keen to do. There's blind assessments that we could be doing of applications. We could be separating out different aspects of what we're looking at. So there's the kind of assessment of the team and the team's capabilities, and the assessment of the idea and the innovation, and maybe looking at those two things differently. There's a whole lot of things that we should be doing, and I think that we should be leading the way on that, and like testing out these different approaches, doing research on it, so that we can then share that understanding with others about how to do this better. So don't have all the answers, but definitely acknowledge that there's going to be issues going on there that we need to kind of uncover and address.
Super. And perhaps if we expand that question out as well to both of you, in terms of recruitment processes as well. I mean, I remember visiting a company. My background's in molecular biology, and the entire R&D force was female, and I'd never seen it before. And asking them, they said that they'd noted using different language in job profiles meant different cohorts of people applied. So how important is language, do you think, and recruitment process in general for promoting equality, diversity? Perhaps LaShawn, if you could comment on that first.
Yeah, the recruitment process is just key, right? When I was in Wales, our apprenticeship program was mostly male. It was 1% females on the shop floor when I got there. And it's the pipeline into all the jobs. It's pretty much most of the jobs within the company. And so as I talked to the recruitment team, they said, "Hey, LaShawn, there's just not women that want to do these jobs." And I said, "That's just crazy. That's just not true." And I said, "There's always diverse talent out there. You just have to cast a wider net. Cast a wider net. Again, keep it simple. cast a wider net. Don't change the mesh sizes in the net to attract, diverse people. You can't change the standards. You can't lower the standards. Just cast a wider net. And as we started rallying, that became our rallying cry with the recruitment team, cast a wider net, find the talent is out there. That's how we went from that 1% to 13% improvement in our shop, in the female numbers on our shop floor. So I think the recruiting process is critical. It's that pipeline that feeds into any organization. And if you're not feeding into the organization diverse talent, then you're never going to change, the demographics of your company. And the second part of that is also retention, right? You can't feed in and then lose your talent. You have to figure out how to keep the talent once you recruit and pull people into your organization as well. So it's a full, it's a full circle. It's a full, complete process of recruiting and also retaining. So it's very critical, both.
Fantastic. And Emily, can I ask the same question to you?
Yeah, I guess I'd echo what's been said. And I think we're working with an organisation at the moment on some training for our organisation. And they're saying about how actually, we talk about diversity and inclusion, but you should start with the inclusion bit, because that's, you need that, because if you start with diversity, but there's no inclusion, you won't retain that talent.
Exactly.
So, the important bit is starting there and getting that right, and then making that clear that you're an inclusive employer, and attracting diverse talent that way. So you're getting that message across.
Super. Emily, there's one specific question to you, and I must admit, I was disappointed by this as well, because it means I'm no longer classed as young. 53, is that too old? I think unfortunately I missed that by quite some way. Is 33 too old to join the Young Innovators competition?
It's not too old to engage with the program, absolutely, but it is outside the age range for the program that we're working on. And we're partnering with the Prince's Trust. We're kind of using their frameworks for where we focus our efforts, and that is the community, the demographics that we're focusing on. But yeah, definitely no reason why you can't engage with our events and the stuff that's going on, but just in terms of the competitions, there are some eligibility rules around the age.
And of course we should say that there are no age restrictions on Innovate competitions other than the Young Innovators. So 33-year-olds are more than welcome and very encouraged to apply to our Smart Grants, which are of course open at the moment. There's a round, you can go have a look at our website. Okay, so we're coming up towards the end of the session. So perhaps I invite you both, just any key messages just to recap, and then we can thank you both and close the session. So LaShawn, any key closeout messages for the audience this morning?
I'll just say that, as with anything, I'll just always reiterate that the first step is acknowledging that your company has a problem, right? Until you can acknowledge that there's a problem, you're just not going to make progress because you're in denial. So get the metrics, get the data, make sure the data is accurate, have a plan to track. And I can never emphasize enough the power of allies. Allies are so important in these movements to drive that momentum, to be the ones. I always say, look, if I'm sitting here and I see something and I say something, people may listen to me, but when allies come into the picture and they see something, they say something, it automatically brings more credibility to what's been said. Because otherwise, when minorities are saying something, it can be perceived as being whiny, right? But when you have the allies saying things, then it definitely brings more credibility and focus to the table. So don't forget the importance of metrics and data, having that strategic action plan, and also leaning into the allies to help drive change.
Super. And Emily, any closing messages from you?
Yeah, and I guess sort of following on from that, acknowledge you've got a problem, but then look at what that opportunity could be by addressing that, and there is that opportunity. So focus on that and think about how much better, more competitive, more productive your company could be. There are huge benefits in doing this, so focus on that.
Super. And for me, the takeaways, the simple message is nothing more, nothing less. Equity versus equality. Cast a wider net. I think that's fantastic, and a really important message about being an ally. So thank you both so much. Lots of applause going on, I'm sure. Fantastic talks, really, really important subject. No, as I said, no more important subject as far as I'm concerned. So thank you both, and thanks to everybody in the audience. This session's available for instant replay. And remember to have a look at the rest of the program for the next 2 days. There's plenty more going on across Emerging Tech Fest. Thanks very much.
Awesome.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you for joining the Emerging Tech Fest. Join us again on our virtual live sessions or watch us on playback anytime, anywhere.